what we were discussing that I thought was fascinating was that the top, until the first split, is pretty flat. Okay, it's a relatively flat track, and there's a lot of jumps in there, and you could almost see the specialized magic button coming into play on that part of the track, adding that compression, speeding the bike up probably and firing the bike out. That bike was incredibly fast on that top half of the track. And then when it came into the steeps, it all leveled up again. And I thought that it was quite interesting to see the way the bikes were working and the corners that were becoming problematic, because there was a corner that seemed to have got a lot worse after this sort of, I call it the sort of Daytona wall jump, where they sort of, the riders sky out
totally.
after the whoops.
Off camber right after that.
Yeah, after that, because that took out, Ronan crashed there, Loris crashed there. The crashes just on the left-hander after that took out Danny, and they took out Amory. And it was, I can understand the off camber, and it was just the way it fed you into that next left-hander it was a section we looked at on track walk, but on track walk it was bone dry. So you could see a line that was ridden in the wets wasn't really beneficial. You came back to a dry line, and it showed that in the wet, that's where these races are so exciting. Danny laid the bike down. He didn't get up that quickly, and he ended up 12th, I think. And then Ronan laid it down again in that corner and still got on the podium. So the average speed, if you could have high track speed on those wet tracks, it's never over, is it? You can make a big mistake, but it's never over. And I think that is, for me, really exciting. And for a spectator, I obviously don't hear the commentary, but I hope that that's explained. These are the conditions that are the great leveler. In the dry race, if you lay the bike down, that's it, you're done. You're probably 30th. Those crashes would have put Ronan, Danny, Amory 30th straight away. But in the wet, it's not over. You can still claw back position.
Yeah, I noticed that section looks super tricky because you're coming off such a high speed section. Then you've got to consciously tone it down. You're obviously carrying maybe a little bit more speed because it's a race run. You haven't seen that section. And then the other thing is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, like a lot of times the wet weather ruts are not what you want to ride in the dry, but because you've hammered a track in the wet, then it's baked. There's a lot of ruts that are going to be pointing the wrong direction or not as optimum, right? And then it gets wet again, and you're a little bit late on that off camber because the rut's not good or you were cautious. And then you're late into that left. Like Amory seemed like he might have just been like super unlucky, a little bit late. It looked so icy when he tipped it into the left. Then Ronan, you could argue, probably being Ronan, like going a little bit too fast in a section, you could probably be cautious. Loïc, you could see how cautious he was. Loris, also a bit aggressive. Full-on racing incidents. So, but exactly, like the reason they're so exciting is it's not over till it's over in a wet race. It's like crashes could come at any time if you have a crash, but then you get super aggressive after that and you stay on, you can make up so much time, because a clean run in the wet looks good, but if someone's aggressive and happens to stay on, they wallop you by a few seconds. You saw the time gaps are way bigger, and that's what makes it so exciting. So those are great honorable mentions. There were a lot of guys that were going good that had crashes that couldn't get up in time, but Danny, inspiring ride. We kind of, every time there's a wet race, everyone thinks back to over a decade ago, is it going to happen again? And it kind of half did. And he got going, he got 12th. And then Ronan, he just throws caution to the wind after a crash like that. And his was like a quick tip over. And I always wonder, like, will the rider ride as quick if he didn't crash there?
Well,
I've made mistakes where I just ride like an absolute lunatic. Sometimes you override it and it's worse. And sometimes you just get away with that aggression and you're like, wow, what would happen if I didn't crash? But it's like, but if you didn't crash, would you have gone as hard? It's such a funny, fine line.
It's really hard because a couple of examples that are sort of weird, I guess, but I remember taking my driving test and making a mistake in my driving test and thinking I'd failed it. I was like, well, that's the driving test done now. I may as well just get on with it. And then I passed the driving test with, that was my only mistake and it was my only minor. And it was just because I relaxed. I thought, well, the game's up. But the flip side of that is maybe if you think about, you're a big golfer if you cock up a hole, you get a double bogey and you go to the next hole, you're like, right, I need to make birdie on this next hole. So you try and take a really adventurous shot or an aggressive shot or overhit something, and you make another mistake and it just spirals. So you have to somehow go, well, that was the mistake, done. Now let's just carry on. And Ronan was up to speed so quickly. I don't know if you saw his GoPro preview run, but it was phenomenal. And I feel conflicted with some of the things that were adjusted with the track. For example, the bottom, the very last jump, that berm was useless. It was built 2 weeks ago, I think. It was too soft. It caused a lot of accidents and crashes when it wasn't scraped. And because no one could actually get over that jump, they built a platform so you could just hop on and hop off like a tabletop. But imagine your advantage if you could get that jump right. So Bernard Kerr cleared that jump in the worst conditions. O'Sheen cleared that jump in the worst conditions. Ronan cleared that jump in the worst conditions. And other riders couldn't even get over it, couldn't even roll up the face. So you're almost denying someone's ultimate skill set. You're sort of leveling the playing field again by going, you know what, we'll put a bridge in here. So maybe it should have been a beeline. Maybe they should have put the bridge around the outside. So if you were going to go for the jump, there was a way over, but there was still an advantage for you if you were going to suck up and go for it.